before we move on to the 10-minute rule motion. Ten-minute rule motion, Liam Conlon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to require the Secretary of State to report to Parliament on the potential merits of disregarding payments received under the Mother and Baby Institutions Payment Scheme operated by the Government of Ireland for the purposes of taxation, means-tested social security payments and social care capital limits and for connected purposes. Madam Deputy Speaker, Philomena Lee was 18 years old when she became pregnant in 1952 and was sent to Sean Ross Abbey Mother and Baby Home in Roscrea, County Tipperary in Ireland. Here Philomena gave birth to her son Anthony, and here they both lived until Anthony reached the age of 3 and Philomena was cruelly forced to give him up for adoption. Anthony was sold to a couple in the United States. Philomena would never see him again. Almost 60 years on, Philomena's story reached a global audience when it was made into the Oscar-nominated film Philomena, starring Dame Judi Dench and Steve Coogan. The film chronicles the time Philomena spent in Sean Ross Abbey and her painstaking search for her long-lost son decades later with the help of author Martin Sixsmith. I wish Philomena's story was an isolated one. Sadly, it is not. Philomena is one of tens of thousands of women and their infant children who spent time in mother and baby homes across Ireland for the perceived sin of becoming pregnant outside of marriage. The women were regularly used as unpaid labour, and infant mortality was alarmingly high. They experienced harsh conditions, mistreatment and abuse, both physical and psychological. In certain homes, women were routinely separated from their children, with some being adopted against the wishes or even knowledge of their mothers, as happened to Philomena Lee and her son Anthony. As a direct result of the abuse and trauma they experienced, many mother and baby home survivors moved to England. In some cases, they came here because they thought that disappearing from their home country was the only way to protect their families' reputations. And so for decades, thousands of survivors, including here in Britain, lived in secrecy and shame. It wasn't until 2021 they finally received an apology from the then Taoiseach Micheál Martin for what he described as a profound generational wrong visited upon Irish mothers and their children. This was followed by the Mother and Baby Institutions Payment Scheme, which opened to applications last March. The scheme represents a measure of accountability for what happened, recognising the lifelong impact that time spent in these institutions will have. It's an impact that will be felt in all corners of a survivor's life, from earning potential and financial security to physical and mental health and well-being. Ultimately, the scheme aims to acknowledge the suffering and improve the circumstances of former residents of mother and baby homes, which is why it is wrong that up to 13,000 survivors living here in Britain today risk losing their benefits if they accept this compensation. Under our current rules, any money accepted through this payment scheme would be considered savings and could see them lose mean-tested benefits and financial support for social care. For some, it is deterring them from making any application at all. It's one of the reasons why only 5% of survivors in Britain have applied so far. And for others, having received a compensation offer, they are now having to weigh up whether it is worth accepting the money or if to do so would sink them into a worse financial situation overall. This includes a survivor from the north of England who has shared her story with me. This woman, who experienced harrowing abuse over several years, applied to the payment scheme in September of last year and received an offer soon after. She told me, "When I first heard about the payment scheme, I thought that it was marvellous and I was excited. I couldn't take it in. I had never had any money at any point in my life. I was going to use this money to visit a half-brother in America. He had been born less than 16 miles away, but I did not know that him or his brother and sister existed until we did some family tracing. It would have been lovely to meet him, but I do not feel that I can use the money for this as my benefits would be affected. The whole point of the payment scheme was to recognise the suffering that survivors experienced while resident, but for many, it has become an additional burden, a process which has forced them to revisit their most traumatic experiences, but seemingly to no avail. But fortunately, there is a solution, and it is a relatively simple one. The introduction of an indefinite capital disregard, which my bill is proposing, would remove any risk to an applicant's benefits. And there is also strong precedent for this, with the same arrangements having been applied to similar special compensation schemes in the recent past. They include those introduced for the victims of the 7/7 London bombings and payments made under the Windrush Compensation Scheme. Madam Deputy Speaker, before I conclude, I want to pay tribute to some of the many incredible organisations in Britain that continue to support mother and baby home survivors. This includes Rosa and the team at Irish in Britain, Sean and the team at the London Irish Centre in Camden, the Irish Cultural Centre in Hammersmith, the Freya Network supporting the Irish community in Leeds, Manchester, Merseyside and beyond, Coventry Irish Society, Luton Irish Forum, Irish Network Stevenage and many more. And finally, I would like to pay tribute to mother and baby home survivors here in Britain, in Ireland and elsewhere, who summoned the courage to share their personal experiences, to recount their most traumatic years in the name of justice. Their bravery not only secured the apology from the Irish government and subsequently brought about the payment scheme, but also, and perhaps more importantly, has contributed enormously to the hard and crucial work of dismantling the stigma and secrecy that has long been associated with time spent in mother and baby homes. This, of course, includes Philomena Lee, whose own story brought this injustice to a global audience, and I am delighted that Philomena's daughter Jane and her grandson Joshua are here in the chamber with us today. Madam Deputy Speaker, Ireland's mother and baby homes were cruel institutions. Over 7 decades, tens of thousands of Irish women were sent there for the perceived sin of becoming pregnant outside of marriage. They were subjected to the most horrific mistreatment and abuse, physical and psychological. Women were used as unpaid labour. They had their children forcibly adopted, sometimes overseas, never to be seen again. The women and children fortunate enough to leave the institutions often came here to Britain. They came here to escape the stigma and shame and build a new life. And there are more than 13,000 survivors living here today. Last year, the Irish government opened a long-awaited compensation scheme for those survivors. It is a small but important mark of accountability and redress for what happened to them. But thousands of survivors in Britain today cannot access this compensation without being penalised for it. If they do, they will lose any means-tested benefits or financial support for social care. Just as we did for the Windrush families, we must now change the law to ensure that compensation payments for victims and survivors are ring-fenced. This bill, Philomena's Law, named after the inspirational and courageous Philomena Lee, will achieve that. I am proud to bring it to the House today, and I hope in the months ahead we will see a change in the law so we can deliver justice for survivors and show them the kindness and respect they have so often been denied in life. Thank you.
The question is, please be seated, Ms Conlon. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many that opinion say aye? Aye. Many that opinion say aye? Aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Liam Conlon, Claire Hannah, Colm Eastwood, Deirdre Costigan, Lola McAvoy, Damien Egan, Uma Kamaran, Sarah Coombs, Helena Dollymore, Florence Eshalomi, Tom Rutland and Rachel Hopkins.
Liam Conlon. Very steady, very steady.
Mother and Baby Institutions Payment Scheme Report Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday, 28th of March.
Friday, the 28th of March.
Yeah.
Well done, well done. The front banks are shuffling over very quickly.